Hello. So, we are now on to Argos. So we just went through father and son. So you can kind of add on to this. So in your Odyssey charts, Athena comes and does what? After just reading through, watching that video, you should be able to say. And then what does Odysseus tell Telemachus about their plan next? So you can fill that out in your note charts about them heading to the house and making their plans. And then Argos now is a short piece. And those of you that are animal, have a good relationship with your pets or are really into dogs, you'll really appreciate this little story about Argos. So on page 637, follow along as I read. That way it'll just kind of help you understand it. So page 631, Argos. So the next day, Odysseus appears at the manor disguised as a beggar. He is accompanied by the swineherd Eumaeus, to whom he has been confiding his plans. So this is now Odysseus coming up to the manor. While he spoke, an old hound, lying near, pricked up his ears and lifted up his muzzle. This was Argos, trained as a puppy by Odysseus, but never taken on a hunt before. His master sailed for Troy. The young men afterward hunted wild goats with him, and hare and deer, but he had grown old in his master's absence. Treated as rubbish now, he lay at last upon a mass of dung before the gates, manure of mules and cows piled there until field hands could spread it on the king's estate. Abandoned there and half destroyed with flies, old Argos lay. But when he knew he heard Odysseus' voice nearby, he did his best to wag his tail, nose down with flattened ears, having no strength to move nearer his master. And the man looked away, wiping a salt tear from his cheek, but he hid this from Eumaeus. Then he said, I marvel that they leave this hound to lie here on the dung pile. He would have been a fine dog from the look of him, though I can't say as to his power and speed when he was young. You find the same good build in house dogs, table dogs landowners keep all for style. And you replied, Eumaeus, a hunter owned him, but the man is dead in some far place. If this old hound could show the form he had when Lord Odysseus left him going to Troy, you'd see him swift and strong. He never shrank from any savage thing he'd brought to bay in the deep woods on the scent. No other dog kept up with him. Now misery has him in leash. His owner died abroad, and here the woman's slaves will take no care of him. You know how servants are. Without a master, they have no will to labor or excel. For Zeus, who views the wide world, takes away half the manhood of a man that day he goes into captivity and slavery. Eumaeus crossed the court and went straight forward to the Megaron among the suitors, but death and darkness in that instant closed the eyes of Argos, who had seen his master, Odysseus, after 20 years. So, just a little story about how 20 years later, his dog that he had trained as a puppy still remembered him and got to see him one last time before he died. And Odysseus got to see him and he's still not ready to give up who he is. So he can't be like, that's my dog. So he's sees him and starts crying. So he has to kind of hold that back. And then he could just be mad about the treatment of the poor dog. So just kind of a little side story about how the dog was still able to recognize him. So those of you with dogs, you totally get it, and it'll tug at your heartstrings a little bit. So now we're going to go on to the suitors. So 638, the suitors. So Odysseus enters the halls of his home and passes among the suitors to beg. Again, he's disguised as a beggar. Antinous, this is an important name, the most arrogant and outspoken of the suitors, breaks into a rage. So Antinous is kind of the leader. He's kind of like the alpha male of the group, if you will. So Antinous, here he is. But here Antinous broke in, shouting, God, what evil wind blew in this pest? Get over, stand in the passage. Nudge my table, will you? Egyptian whips are sweet to what you'll come to here, you nosing rat, making your pitch to everyone. These men have bread to throw away on you because it is not theirs. Who cares? Who spares another's food when he has more than plenty? With guile, Odysseus drew away, then said, a pity that you have more looks than heart. You'd grudge a pinch of salt from your own larder to your own handyman. You sit here fat on others' meat and cannot bring yourself to rummage out a crust of bread for me? Then anger made Antinous' heart beat hard, and glowering under his brows, he answered, Now, you think you'll shuffle off and get away after that impudence? Oh, no, you don't. It's kind of funny. Oh, no, you don't. The stool he let fly hit the man's right shoulder on the packed muscle under the shoulder blade, like solid rock, for all the effect one saw. Odysseus only shook his head, containing thoughts of bloody work, as he walked on, then sat and dropped his loaded bag again upon the door-sill. Facing the whole crowd, he said, and eyed them all, "One word only, my lords and suitors of the famous queen. One thing I have to say. There is no pain, no burden for the heart when blows come to a man, and he defending his own cattle, his own cows and lambs. Here it was otherwise. Antinous hit me for being driven on by hunger. How many bitter seas men cross for hunger! If beggars interest the gods, if there are furies pent in the dark to avenge a poor man's wrong, then may Antinous meet his death before his wedding day." Then said Eupeithes, son Antinous. So Antinous says this is just saying who his dad is, who raised him wrong. "Enough. Eat and be quiet where you are, or shamble elsewhere, unless you want these lads to stop your mouth by pulling you by the heels or hands and feet over the whole floor till your back is peeled." But now the rest were mortified, and someone spoke from the crowd of young bucks to rebuke him. "A poor show that, hitting this famished tramp. Bad business. If he happened to be a god, you know they go in foreign guise, the gods do, looking like strangers, turning up in towns and settlements to keep an eye on manners, good or bad." But at this notion, Antinous only shrugged. Telemachus, after the blow his father bore, sat still without a tear, though his heart felt the blow. Slowly he shook his head from side to side, containing murderous thoughts. Penelope, on the higher level of her room, had heard the blow and knew who gave it. Now she murmured, "Would God you could be hit yourself, Antinous, hit by Apollo's bowshot." "And Eurynomé," her housekeeper put in, "he and no other? If all we pray for came to pass, not one would live till dawn." Her gentle mistress said, "Oh, Nan, they are a bad lot. They intend a ruin for all of us. But Antinous appears a blacker-hearted hound than any. Here is a poor man come, a wanderer, driven by want to beg his bread, and everyone in hall gave bits to cram his bag. Only Antinous threw a stool and banged his shoulder." So she described it sitting in her chamber among her maids, while her true lord was eating. Then she called in the forester and said, "Go to that man on my behalf, Eumaeus, and send him here, so I can greet and question him. Abroad in the great world, he may have heard rumors about Odysseus. He may have known him." So, kind of gives you an idea of what Odysseus is up against. So he and Antinous kind of have this head-to-head, right? And Odysseus, this is very hard for him because throughout his life he's very violent, I guess, able to defend himself, able to be an aggressor. I mean, he's the war hero of Troy. He's fought how many people and creatures throughout his journey to try and get back home, and now he just has to kind of sit and take this in order to eventually have the upper hand against these suitors. So he insults Antinous, says, "Oh," he's like, "You're not even going to give me food that's not even yours? Like, you're getting fat off of somebody else's food. How dare you think that you should not even share when it's not even yours?" So then Antinous, you can kind of see his temper and that he doesn't even care about this poor old guy. And that he doesn't really have a fear of the gods either. Because the others, after Odysseus says, "For shame on you, like, you better hope that there's no gods around that are going to punish you for how you treated me," because that's again against the code of hospitality. But Antinous obviously doesn't care. But the other guys are kind of nervous now, like, "Ooh, maybe we shouldn't be like this because the gods could have vengeance on us," but Antinous doesn't listen. So that's a glimpse of the suitors and the stuff that Penelope is having to be putting up with for the last 20 years. And then the last thing then is that Penelope wants to talk to him. So she hears about this guy. He's a wanderer. Oh, well, maybe he's heard of Odysseus. So you can kind of put that summary of the suitors kind of here. Like, Odysseus shows up. He meets Antinous. Antinous throws a stool at him. Odysseus kind of curses him in a way. And then Penelope hears about it and wants to talk to him to see if he knows anything about Odysseus. So that's where we are before we go on reading into the next section.